Hello, let me summarize what we are going to speak about in a couple of minutes. Business decision makers have much more data than they want to handle. More data is not always good. Additional data can just lead to cognitive overload, making decision making ineffective and slow. An average decision maker uses 5 data sources for insights, starting from information on consumer interests to purchase patterns to competition performance. The data sources come in many shapes and forms. This, rather than helping the user, just overwhelms the user, thereby leading to decision paralysis. Despite all the data, it is obvious to all of us that a lot of decisions are made on gut feel and experience. Only half of the decision makers claim to use data to make decisions, and even they don't use data for every decision that they make. At Ongil.ai, we have created a 3 component solution to help enterprises overcome these problems and achieve data driven product market fit.
Ongil's AI solution is designed to help decision makers answer questions in the following 4 quadrants. What is the optimal positioning for my product in the current market to gain more revenue? Which is the ideal market to expand to with my existing product line? Is there a new market niche I can capture with product innovation? What new product lines should I create to enter a particular market? To accomplish this, Ongil's solution consists of 3 boxes.
The first box simply brings together the data from different sources to create context intelligence. Once the data are brought together, the next step is to make decisions. Ongil.ai's second box suggests optimal decisions, be it product, pricing, promotions, or new market expansion decisions, taking the context into account. Once the decisions are presented, the next step is to evaluate these decisions in a sandbox before implementing them into the real world. This is exactly what Ongil.ai's third box provides.
That is the story of how we intend to focus on insights rather than just adding to the information overload. Now, with that done, I would like to take a step back and answer a couple of important questions in the next sections. Why do the existing AI frameworks not achieve the above? What is the fundamental shift in the solution framework thought process that is required to create a change? A small story from history will illustrate why we are building what we are building. Imagine that you are in Paris in 1886. The art scene is bustling with activity, with new waves of thoughts all around, reflected in paintings to sculptures to architecture. In fact, the blueprint for the Eiffel Tower is just being made. The wave is sweeping through art in the form of Impressionism. Artists are moving away from realistic depictions of subjects to nuance, to capturing those nuances of lights with thin yet visible brushstrokes. In this vibrant time dominated by masters, a young artist who just graduated from the Academy of Fine Arts at a not so young age of 33 moved to Paris with a dream of establishing himself as a successful painter. The artist was Vincent van Gogh. He would go on to become the foundational pillar of an entire new era of art called post-impressionism. Van Gogh was an unparalleled creative genius. Though he was not much celebrated during his lifetime, after his lifetime in the century and the century after, he will go on to become one of the most celebrated artists.
No artist, not even Vincent van Gogh, can develop in a vacuum. He was influenced by many streams of thought that were prevalent then. I'm just pointing out 3 of those to emphasize the point here. A new wave of artistic thought was sweeping through Paris in the 1880s. It was the wave of Impressionism. The Impressionist paintings brought in dynamism to the usage of color, like in this series of paintings of water lilies by Claude Monet. Pointillism was another early influence on Vincent van Gogh when he first came to Paris. It was a method of using alternate colored dots to achieve images of varied hues. This will be reflected in his paintings in a different form. The sharp lines between the various objects was something that was not prevalent in Western art during the time. Like other artists of his era, Fonga was captivated. In fact, he had a specific name for this influence, Japanosaire. A lot of thought and learning goes into creating a painting. From the three different painting styles that we said Fonga learned from, he had to pick up a variety of things. One, the thickness of the strokes had to be considered, the length of the strokes, consequently, the type of ink that needs to be used, what hues of colors does one want to produce, and most importantly, what emotions that one want to invoke in the audience. Now, all these are interlinked. Now, the type of ink determines the length of the strokes, and length of the strokes and the closeness of these strokes, like we saw from the example from pointillism, influences the hues of colors used. And finally, let's say if I want to invoke an emotion in an audience and probably also look for a sale of the art piece that I'm creating, I also need to figure out where it should be located. The subject finally plays a major role in determining all the outcomes. Now, again, as we just discussed, these are not to be seen in isolation, but these are all interlinked. And this is where the judgment of an artist comes into play, where all these multiple, probably thousands or even millions of possibilities have to be considered before deciding on a particular structure for a painting. All these influences and more, bound together by the unparalleled genius of Fonga, created artworks. In fact, in a 2 year period, he almost created 1,000 masterpieces. In this particular example, you can see how the thickness of the brush strokes, the choice of colors, and the sharp contours interact to create magic. In this particular case, the whole painting is definitely much more than the sum of its parts.
This kind of synthesis of ideas is the bedrock on which progress in art, science, or any other human endeavor have happened throughout history. And this is what needs to happen in business analytics for it to become transformative rather than being merely incremental. Systems have to be built to enable the creativity of decision makers to fully flourish. Where are we today? Let's call the AI framework currently in use as traditional AI. Traditional AI depends on historical patterns to guide future insights discovery. This means they use a lot and lots of data. However, we want AI to be able to help us in uncertain and novel situations. This is the central paradox of traditional AI for business analytics. What we are creating at Ongil.ai is a framework that will overcome this critical limitation. We borrow from the time tested principles of how knowledge has been created throughout history. We create mathematical tools that synthesize data in a way such that the business decision makers can create their magic on top of them. What exactly do I mean by all of this?
Let me walk you through an example to illustrate how Ongil's analysis framework works. Let's take this example of a citrus tea. And now, this could be any citrus tree, but what we are interested in are the attributes of this citrus tea. For example, there could be a volume of 500 ml. It could come from India. Obviously, this is in a bottle. This is a tea, and probably the tea is in a premium pricing tier. Goes without saying, the flavor is citrus. It belongs to this brand. It is an organic tea, and the benefit that is claimed that it is antioxidant. And this has a certain sales volume. So all these attributes coming together is what define this particular SKU. So the first step is to understand a given product in terms of its constituent attributes. It is not only the attributes of a product that determine its sales. The interest for the product and the kind of people that are interested in buying the product determines the overall sale of a product. Now, this citrus tea, obviously, people might search for citrus tea in different forms in search engines. Now, there could be multiple other searches that they do. Now, all this have to be taken into account. Now, people could post on social media regarding the tea itself or various attributes of the tea or something related. Now, that has to be captured. Now, who are the users who are posting these posts? That will give us an insight into the characteristics of the people. Now, the same personality could be tracked across different sources. Now, based on after analysis of all these profiles, we might conclude that there are so many profiles who are engineers, so many profiles who are consultants, so many who are executives, and so many who are students. Now, this combined with the earlier data gives us a holistic picture of the product attributes that lead to a certain sale volume, and also the context in terms of search intent, in terms of social media activity, in terms of the type of people who search for a product, gives us a full context to the particular product. Now, all these different attributes captured from the product attributes as well as from the search attributes as well as from the people who are searching for the products can all come together as a list of attributes that determine the sale of a product. Now, making sense of the interrelationships between all these attributes is where traditional AI typically stops. Now, the reason for this is that like the data for each of these components may not be fully available as the trend is just evolving or a product is just launched in the market and there is not enough sale in the market and all we are looking to do is take a corrective measure. Now, that is where complexity science backed AI comes into play. It doesn't merely see the products and the product attributes in isolation, but rather figures out how the different components of the product influence one another and also the sale outcome. For example, the type of product or let's say the type of benefit that a particular product claims, it determines the pricing tier. The branding affects the pricing tier. Now the pricing tier will in turn affect how much sale happens. And it will also determine what market can it be sold to. And independent of all this, the overall search traffic could say what is the input, what is their effect on the net sale. Now, there are much more components and therefore this has to be done in a very scalable manner and there has to be an approach which is specifically fine-tuned for such analysis that needs to be built in. Now, this is where again complexity science backed AI scores. Now that this knowledge graph is built where we have the interrelationships between the various attributes, the next step would be to leverage this to help us make decisions. Now, how do we go about doing it? As we said earlier, each SKU is a sum of its attributes and the relationship between those attributes. Now, given here are three SKUs that are just the combination of attributes. Now, each of them could have a different search traffic. Now, they could have so much traffic in terms of the marketplace activity revolving around these SKUs. Now, what is the revenue that these kind of claims make, revenue that Flavor can potentially provide? Can I run an ad campaign to impact the revenue? Now, putting together all these, one can estimate the expected revenue with a certain amount of probability. Now, there are certain aspects that we can consider to increase or decrease the revenue. For example, I can bring down the price and see if my revenue goes up or I can simulate, let's say, an advertisement campaign and then figure out how that impacts the revenue. Now, after taking all these possibilities into account, I can choose those SKUs and those campaigns and those uh, product positioning I need to consider for further evaluation. The final piece of the puzzle is that having certain shortlisted decisions that one would want to execute is to test them in a sandbox environment before implementing it in the real world. Now, one could choose a target consumer segment, identify their interests, characteristics, and so on. Now, how do these various attributes of a consumer segment determine the sale of a product? Based on this, can I form a product hypothesis that caters to this segment? Then one can generate, auto generate using AI different marketing campaigns for these product hypotheses to be run as social media experiments for me to test the validity of these models. So here, obviously, now with the cost per click pricing skyrocketing, one cannot just simply splurge money and then run these campaigns. So we have a very intelligent backend system that effectively optimizes the campaigns to do the experiments to determine the product market fit.
Rather than us speaking about our own solution in all its glory, we thought it would be good to have one of our customers the experience of working with us. Vivek from 3M, who is an e-commerce leader, has kindly agreed to share his experiences of what working with Ongil.
Hi, my name is Vivek Mohandas. I'm the e-commerce program manager for APAC at 3M Consumer Business Group. The biggest problem companies face today is information overload in the space of e-commerce. Having too many data points is similar to the story of four blind men and the elephant. Everyone sees data in a very different way. The key aspect of data is marrying the key metrics along with the business levers which leads to growth. And this process is not just science alone, it's an art as well. I've been working with Ongil for about 7-8 months currently, and I think we are moving in the right direction towards deriving insights from data and solving business problems. The two things I like about Ongil is one, their attention to detail. They work with great efforts, tying up all pieces of information together and try not only to derive explicit information or very apparent information, but also try to give extrapolated information which helps us in making decisions with great accuracy. The second point is their dedication and focus in solving business problems. They don't just act like a data mining agency, but work together as a business consultant in helping us solve problems. I wish Ongil all the very best and looking forward to work with them in future as well. Thank you.
The portrait that you see behind me was thought to be a self-portrait of Vincent van Gogh till 2011. In 2011, it was found that this was the only portrait of Theo van Gogh painted by Vincent van Gogh. Now, Theo was a younger brother to Vincent, but that's what not makes this brotherhood special. It was Theo who supported Vincent financially throughout his journey. Not only financially, but Theo brought in even new artistic perspectives to Vincent because Theo himself was an art dealer. More importantly, Theo was a confidant as well as a great moral support for Vincent, especially in his times in his mental asylum before he committed suicide. Now, the grief-stricken Theo passed away just 6 months after. The brothers exchanged over 1,000 letters, which art historians believe was critical to Vincent's success as a painter. Now, the history is peppered with such Theos who support Vincent's invisibly. Now, of course, the Vincent van Goghs of the world is the creative genius, but having a Theo by the side would never hurt. After all, one wouldn't want to take an audacious magical journey alone without any collaboration. Thank you.